One thing we think we do is that we build a new product category, and one that's like really challenging because as you will see, there are a lot of things that are very difficult to manage when you build something that's new and where people don't really understand what you're doing. You need to first understand what the problem is, and then you need to understand how you can market your product so that people actually understand what it is you're doing. As you see, I was really impressed by the use of emojis by Hugo. So I will use, this is the first time I use a lot of emojis. Here's like the first one, so let's keep going. And I wanted to start with this because this is not what we're doing, unfortunately. I really like the product, but who of you has used Kickstarter? Who of you has like supported a project or even like raised money with Kickstarter? And why I find this so interesting is not because of the product, this Pebble Watch, e-watch, like it's impressive because I think the battery lasts 7 days, which is like 7 days more than an Apple Watch. But what I found really interesting here is this one, like 20 million dollars were raised for this project by nearly 80,000 people. And most of them didn't even get anything in return. They just supported the project because they liked the project. And if you ask yourself, like 10 years ago, would anyone think that you would like pledge money or support a project without getting any return for that? Probably not. People would have thought that you're crazy. But today, Kickstarter has raised like nearly $3 billion for like 100,000 different projects. And they kind of like keep growing, and like it's becoming very normal that people like start projects on Kickstarter, from products to social impact projects to art projects like exhibitions or books. And what all like there are like other companies that I would mention like Airbnb, eBay, Apple, Patagonia, Google. What all these companies have in common, they are category creators. So what they did is they created new market spaces by breakthrough innovations. And what's really important is that they not only like took away market share from another company, but they created a new market. So it's like very different from what you would call disruptors or disruption these days, because I hate the word disruption, because for me disruption means somehow I take the money from the one company and just transfer it to another company. So in the end, like the market stays the same. There's no value add. It's like a zero-sum game. But like if you talk about like market creation, you actually create new market spaces that didn't exist before, and you expand the market. It pays to be a category creator. This is like, I found this in Harvard Business Review, so it's true. Actually, it's not fake news. But what you found is that like they did like looked at 100 fastest growing companies between 2009 and 2011, and for those who are interested in business, this is really interesting. I have a business background, so I love these numbers. But what you see is that the companies that created a new category accounted for 53% of the revenue growth, and for nearly 75% of the market capitalization growth. So you could say, and this is what how they summarized, is that category creators experience much faster growth and much higher valuations from investors than companies that didn't create a category. So, and if you say, I don't care about revenue, I don't care about valuations, I hate stock markets, whatever, I can tell you that beyond the economics, category creation is like a really fun thing to do. It's a bit like surfing the unsurfable. So if you think like about this is what category creation feels like. So you see like who of you ever did surfing or is a surfer? So you probably know this feeling when you see a big wave coming. You kind of like you start like going after the wave, saying, "Wow, I'm going to ride this wave," and you're like totally focused on this one wave for a moment. And either you ride it and it's the best feeling ever, or you crash and it still was like a good experience and try to get the next one. So this is how I feel like about category creation, like about building something new that didn't exist before. It's like surfing the unsurfable. That is a picture from our, I think it was like it was taken in beta house at least. So, and there's like our old poster that we had in the office. It was stolen one day. Like one day we came back to the office and it was gone. So if you ever see it somewhere hanging, please bring it back to us, because I paid like $35 for that. But it was like it said like, life is short, build stuff that matters, and this is supposed to say Blinkist, so it's very artsy. But it's actually the founding team of Blinkist, like 4.5 years ago. It's like the 4 founders. Every time I see this picture, I kind of like realize how much you age when you do a startup, or maybe probably how much you age over 5 years, because like I couldn't recognize myself on this picture. So, but what you see is like 4 people with like an idea. And we came to Berlin with this idea, with the thesis that, or the problem that we experienced ourselves, that we wanted to read more books, but we didn't have time to read books anymore. So we were like in full-time jobs, we worked in consulting companies or like in big corporates. And we felt like, oh, there are all these cool books that we want to read, but we don't have time or motivation to read them. So we're missing out on great information that could help us to improve or to get better. At the same time, this is like 2011, so it's kind of like some years ago, we realized that people were reading more and more on their smartphones. So there was like a change happening and people started reading on the smartphones. And we thought, look, if we could combine this kind of like need for reading more books with the changing reading behaviors of people reading on their smartphone anytime and anywhere, there could be a cool business opportunity. So we created a thesis that in order to keep up with like our mobile modern lifestyles, the way non-fiction book content needs to be created, distributed, and presented must change. So we thought, well, that's like amazing. Like everyone will love that. So we thought, okay, it's probably the biggest market opportunity ever, and we're like brainstorming what we're going to do and how we're going to conquer the world. And we started working on the product. But what we realized then is we talked to a lot of people, and everyone said like, that's never going to work out. So that's a stupid idea. Maybe the problem you're solving is nice, but there will be no market for it. No one will ever pay for that product. So we started asking ourselves as well, so is this actually really a good product idea, or is it just like something we like to do, but there's no market for it? Luckily, we kind of like overcame this struggle of, on the one side, you have like a strong belief in a product, but on the other side, no one believes in your product. And we just like said, okay, we just give it a try and see what happens. So fast forward like 4 years. This is a picture we took end of last year. We were 35 by then. We are now 50 people. We have a dog, and the dog was supposed to be here tonight. He signed up for the meetup, but he's not here, right? So if you don't have a dog in your company, you should get a dog. That's a really good thing to do. But it's just like some numbers to show you what like the path we did over the last 4 years. So we have 2 million users, 100,000 paying customers. Our revenue grew like 200% over the last 3 years, year over year. Oh, by the way, the dog is coming over there, I think. And we raised around 70 million in venture capital from investors from Germany and US. And interestingly, from no one believed there's a market, it seems there is a market. So I try to think of like summarize like 7 things we learned over the last 4 years when it comes to build a new market category and to build a category and market a category. I guess they are like very universal. So they're not only if you like do something in an existing market, an existing niche, you can still like apply some of these learnings too. So the first one, like learning number 1 is create a culture of learning. And this is like, I think the thing I'm most excited about, because like I'm a strong believer that culture is the most important thing you can do for your company. I think like culture defines everything. So what I think is like what a lot of startups do wrong in the first place, and I think like the family would agree with that, is that you get like obsessed with things that are not really important for yourself. So you think about PR, you think about fundraising, and you spend like less time building your product and talking to your potential customers, because everything, all these kind of like, it's really cool to get like an article on Gründerszene or wherever, which is great by the way, but or to talk to investors and like meet them for lunch or for dinner. It's like feels like really great, but in the end, it doesn't really help you to move forward. So what you should be focused on in the first place is kind of like really understand who is your potential customer, who is your potential market, and just like be obsessed with like finding a solution for their problem rather than creating stories for investors or for the press. Another interesting thing is when you kind of like navigate in an area that's really unknown, like when you try to create a new product category, it's like there's a lot of uncertainty. You don't really know, is there a market and who's your customer? So you have to learn to unlearn. What I mean by that is that you have to kind of like throw away a lot of stuff you believe in and just start fresh, like with a beginner's mind. Kind of really look at what people do and how do people do stuff, and try to learn how they see the world rather than just apply your own thinking of the world to the problem. The second learning is that changes are an opportunity. So I think like every time something changes, there's like if like behaviors change, for example, there's a chance or like an opportunity to create something new and to bring something to the market. And I think what's really important is like there are a lot of different drivers for change. So there can be demographics, so people grow older or younger people come in, like Jodel can talk about that probably quite a lot. There can be cultural changes. So in terms of the Kickstarter example, probably like 10 years ago, no one would have like pledged money for like a social project. But these days, especially our generation is much more interested in kind of like doing good rather than just consume things. Or if you look at Airbnb, like it's much more important for our generation these days to have access to to an apartment rather than to own an apartment. So we don't need an apartment in Marrakesh as long as we can get spend a nice vacation there over via Airbnb. Technology, obviously, if you think about mobile, something that didn't exist 10 years ago, a huge game changer, a lot of opportunities there, and change a lot of behaviors too. And regulation, which I'm not super excited about, but can be always, of course, a change driver for change too. That's my most favorite one. It's so when you want to create a new category, try to look for things that the society kind of has accepted. So something that's really annoying, where people say, okay, this is just how it goes. I kind of accept this, and this, for example, really annoying. Accept it this way, and I won't make a change, because this is where problems are that are not solved yet. And what we found, what worked really well for us, is start with the answers. Rather than start with the questions, try to find answers that you want, try to frame hypotheses that you want to answer yourself. So instead of saying, do people want to read more books on their mobile phones, we thought, okay, we believe that if we create a format that is short enough and engaging enough to be read on a mobile phone, people would actually consume more nonfiction content. And what we did, kind of with this thesis, we went out and tried to understand, is this actually true or not? So we really tried to create empathy for potential customers. We really kind of found people, talked to them, and said so walk me through your day, walk me through your how do you read, when do you read, what do you want to read, do you feel you read enough? And kind of really try to understand how they think and what their problems are, rather than just assume that we know what their problems are. Really interesting is to ask the question as well, how do people solve the problem today? So in the case of books that are too long, or you don't have motivation to read books, people would actually go to Wikipedia to try to find a book summary, for example. And this was really interesting because it showed us there is a demand, there's a problem, and people already try to find ways to solve it, but the way they solve it today is probably not the best way, because one problem we found out with Wikipedia is that you don't really know what the quality is, and you don't really know who wrote the summary of a book on Wikipedia. So it was a way to solve the problem, it wasn't perfect. So it really helped us to understand how people would approach such a problem. Really can try immerse yourself. So we did research in the Berlin U-Bahn. So we really went to the U-Bahn and looked how people read on their mobile phones. So it's a bit awkward, I admit, when you sit next to someone and say okay, what is this guy reading on his phone? He's reading the news. And how long they are reading, and are they paying attention? And we did the same when we started doing audio 2 years ago. So we really looked at people, how they use audio. We looked at how people use audio in a car, how people use audio on their mobile phone when they're driving, when they're commuting, for example. It's a bit awkward, but I think, I tell you, it's really important to really understand what the behaviors of people are, because it will create so much insights and help you to find the right product or the right solution for a customer's problem. And then, of course, try to collect data points. Data points doesn't mean that you have to read a lot of research reports, but it can as well a data point I would consider as well doing an interview and create some insights from that. And in the end, you can really map them out on your table and say, okay, now I know everything I need to know, and am I sure that this answers my question? Or do I now have all the information I need to validate or falsificate my hypothesis, or not? The fourth learning is what I don't know if this has a name, but it actually means that you don't know yet. Everything is still a hunch. So you talk to people, you create empathy, you immerse yourself, you collect data points, and you say, I believe there is an opportunity, but still it's just it's a hunch, it's an idea. You don't know if this is true. So what you obviously have to do, you have to validate them. So kind of build a product, build a prototype, do more custom interviews, and really say, okay, is this working for you? Is this solving a problem? And one thing we found out that's really interesting is that you actually, asking people if this solves the problem is not the right approach. It's you really have to build a prototype to make sure that people can actually use it. And one other thing, not only a prototype, but what we did very early on is we charged for the product from day one. So we said, okay, obviously people will say, yeah, that's a cool idea, but will they pay money for it? I don't know. But at the moment people have to pay for it, they really show you that they really want to use the product. So in hindsight, probably was the best decision ever that we charged for the product from day one, because for a lot of content products these days, they have the issue of monetization, which we never had, because we always had a business model integrated into the product from day one. And I'm a big fan of kind of like charge for your product, whatever the payment method is you use, but charge for your product from day one to really prove that people have interest in your product and not just like think it's a nice to have, but really like a must have for them. That's a picture from Beta House as well. It was called the Blinkist validation board. So we had like core assumptions here. Like unfortunately you can't read them, or maybe we made this on purpose. I can't really remember. But you had core assumptions here, and then you had like validated assumptions and invalidated assumptions. So we are kind of really try to find the information we needed to answer the questions we had. Another thing we did was called like guerrilla customer development. So we were at Beta House at the time, so we just like ran down to the cafe at Beta House and like randomly walked to people and said like, hey, can we ask you 5 questions, or can you please use this prototype? And it was really, really cool. Like I did this together with like one of our interns, and he was like a Swedish guy, so he was like really good in talking to people all the time. So we just like would approach everyone and say, hey, can we buy you a coffee? And can you answer us like 5 or 10 questions? And everyone was super helpful. And to be honest, like as a German, this might be a bit awkward in the first place, kind of like just approaching people, say, hey, do you have like 10 minutes, or can I have 10 minutes of your time? But what I found out is like people I really, really love to help. Like they're really interested in kind of like first like see the product, then give their honest feedback, and then learn more about the product. So probably this was one of the most important things we did, just like randomly talk to people and validate our ideas and our prototypes in the early phase. The fifth learning is that especially when you create a new category in the first place, it's like 50% product, but as well 50% branding, because what you build doesn't really exist, and it's not like that people just like shift their behavior from A to B. So in case of like, for example, Zalando, people always bought shoes. So now they just buy shoes online instead of going to a retail store. But in case of Blinkist, like it's not that people are looking for book summaries all the time on Google. It's more like, okay, you create a product category, and you have to educate people to how to use the category and what's the benefit of the category. So the product is important, but the branding and the message is really important too. So what obviously we learned, like, and this is like true not only for like a new category, but probably for every product, is that you should make it easy to understand and like somehow cool at the same time. And if you show you this was our first landing page. This was like pre-beta, so we didn't have a product. We just like thought, hey, it's cool like to get some email addresses. And this was a time when you did this kind of like smoke test, when you thought, okay, getting an email address is a validation for your product already. But if you look at that, I'm not sure, but if I look at this, I see a lot of words. I see a very unclear message. So we said like Blinkist, make lifelong learning easy. I think like probably like 50 people signed up, and this were mostly our friends and family, because no one got what we actually were doing here. So we tried to make it somehow cool, like a lot of big words like lifelong learning, make it easy. You see growth, opportunity, where this manifesto. We spent like probably a week writing this manifesto, and we spent like 200 euros just taking this picture. And we thought, okay, all we need is this. And then we realized, okay, it's not. And just like you don't have to care about all this stuff, just like make it as easy as possible. And I think like what's really important if you want to market a brand, like a really innovative product, is that you have to establish a frame of reference. And what worked for us, for example, was like when we came to the US, we tried like use all these cool words, and we tried to kind of like make it really innovative and whatever, like blinks and all this stuff. And then they said like, that's like Cliff Notes for business books. That's cool. So Cliff Notes is kind of like, I don't know if everyone knows what Cliff Notes is. It's like everyone in the US basically use Cliff Notes for school. In German we had like Reklam, and probably like in France. Is there something that summarizes all the fiction books? Like, no? Did you ever read books in school? Back then already. So whatever, until we tried to pitch this, we used a lot of words, and they just summarized it. Like they reference it to a product they knew and they had like good emotions with, and this was all we needed. Obviously, it doesn't sound like as cool as like, okay, we're creating a new format that is like mobile first and super innovative, and we do it in text and audio, blah blah. But like just like using establishing this reference made it really easy to communicate the product. And there's a really nice concept called Maya. Was introduced by a guy called I think Rowie. I'm blanking on the name now, but what it says basically is like its name is like most advanced yet acceptable, and this is like because people are torn between curiosity about new things and fear of anything new. So what you have to find is the right balance between making something that is new enough to make people curious, but not too new that people are kind of afraid of using it. And you kind of always find the balance of, okay, it's like most advanced yet acceptable. And it's quite a big challenge because obviously you want to kind of like make it super innovative. You want to use all these cool words, but in the end, often kind of like less words and less cool words can be more effective. Creative marketing is really important because, like as I said, people don't go to Google search for book summaries. They don't search for Blinkist. They search for shoes, they should search for food, but they don't search for like book summaries. So you have to find ways how to educate people on your market proposition, on your value proposition, and like all these kind of like more traditional marketing formats like AdWords, display advertisements, they normally don't work for you. So what you try to do is kind of like find like influencers, people that can really speak about your product and really educate the market with you about the proposition and about the value of your product. 6, and this is like an interesting one as well, like there is always competition. So I remember I was sitting in one of my first pitch meetings ever with like an investor, and he was like a Silicon Valley investor turned German VC. And we came to the slide of the competitor slide, and I said like, yeah, so what we do doesn't exist yet. We don't have competition. And he looked at me and said like, you know what? Like if you tell me you don't have competition, that's a red flag. It's like, what? Isn't this what every VC dreams of, like no competition? He said like, if you don't have competition, then you either didn't do your research or you don't have a market. And I think like what we learned as well is there's always a substitute. Even not doing something is a substitute to your product. Like people, in terms of like, so there's like direct competition, like products that do exactly the same with the same value proposition, and there can be indirect competition. It can be even very far away from what you do. So in terms of like everyone who's working in the mobile space probably knows that the biggest competition we have these days is Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, all these products that take away people's time. Because in the end, in the mobile space, we all compete for time and attention of the users, at least in the consumer space. And like every time a user can use your app and they go to Facebook, that's kind of like like they are your competitors. And but it was as well like even if they're competitors in your market, or like you kind of like be the first one, and then like other companies start doing the same what you do, it helps you to validate the market space. So like an interesting thing that happened for us, like the first 2 years, we had like a hard time raising money because everyone like still like there were like already traction for the product, but no one believed that there's a huge market opportunity ahead of us. In the last 2 years, probably like 10 competitors have popped up all over the world, and suddenly all the investors see, oh, like now there's a market, there's competition, must mean there's something, and they're like investors from the US investing in this market space. We kind of like get approached by investors quite a lot because everyone knows kind of like feels because of like the amount of competition that there must be something about this market. The last thing, and then I'm already done, is be foolish, and there's like the next emoji, because like somehow, as I said, like it's serve the unservable. You don't really know if it's going to work out, and I thought, okay, what's the best way to close a presentation? It's obviously with a quote by Steve Jobs. I don't want to read it, but I think what it just says, and probably every one of you has heard it. It's like it just said, he said that you can't connect the dots looking forward, you can only connect them looking backward. And what you have to do is just you have to trust yourself. You have to trust your intuition. You can like you can do your homework, but you have to trust in yourself and be foolish enough to try it, because if you don't try, you don't know if it's going to work out. So I think this is like, if there's one thing I would leave, you can take away from tonight is just give it a try, even if no one else believes in you. Just do it, and you will see if it works. And if it doesn't work, then you learn something at least. So if you want to serve the unservable with us, we are hiring, but I saw like everyone's an entrepreneur here, so probably you don't look for a company right now, but in case you do, talk to me. There's like there were like a lot of cool people from Blinkist here, like over there. She's French, by the way, so all the French people can talk to her. That's Deborah, by the way. Say hi, and over there like more people. So in case you're interested in working with us, in case you're interested in the product or you have like feedback, let me know. I will be around for some time, and yeah, thank you.
I really like your app, that's for starters. And therefore I'm wondering what's the product road ahead for you, because you already said your vision is lifelong learning. And looking at your app, I really like it, but I also see a lot of opportunity for improvements, and I would like to know what's your vision and your product road ahead.
So maybe, like, what kind of opportunities do you see?
Maybe I would first like to know your statement on this, and then I will tell you afterwards. Yeah.
So I think like the way we want, like obviously the product itself works today, and like one big driver for growth was audio. So audio is a big thing we want to work on in the next couple of months and years. And the next thing we're really excited about is kind of expanding the offer of Blinkist. So right now we only do books, but there are like a lot of different sources that you could probably condense in a way that people can engage and digest it. So that's something we look at. We look at audio first platforms like Alexa, for example, or Google Home right now, which are really interesting. That's probably what I can say by now. But in general, like it's on the one side, improving the product, make it easier, improve discovery, make sure that you find the right reads, because I think this is often a problem a lot of people have. They open the app and they don't know what's next. And that's the one side improvement. On the other side is the innovation part, which can be new content sources or like new platforms in general. And now, but maybe I'm kind of like too far away from my consumers right now. So tell me.
We can also maybe talk later or so.
Yeah.
But in general, maybe it can be made more addictive. Learning, you applying everything that you learned from Hooked, from Nia Eyal, I guess.
Yeah.
And also there are so many different medium types, like as you said, pictures. There are like no pictures at all. So many concepts would be so much more clearer if you have pictures right out of the books, for example. I mean, there are copyright issues as well, but those are some ideas. There are others, but we can talk later.
Let's talk later. I'm really interested about how to apply the Hooked model, but I'm sure we will make you happy with some things we have in the pipeline.
Okay, I try to read a lot, but I don't have time, so I obviously see the product market fit. But one thing why I didn't use Blinkist is that I feared that a lot of the message from the author gets lost if you just take away 80% of the pages. And I kind of felt that the author chose to share all those informations with you for a purpose. How would you respond to that?
I think I would say three things. The first one is, like, you're right. So like we don't intend to replace the book. So the way we think about Blinkist is always like it's a bridge between no book and the book. So obviously when you summarize the content, you can't just like pretend that you get everything away that you read with the full book. But the way we think about this as well, like that, like it's better to read like the 50-minute version instead of reading nothing. And if you find this kind of like summary interesting, you can still read the full book. So this is actually what a lot of customers do is they say, for example, hey, look, I'm committed to read one book per month, but I want to read the right book. And I don't want to kind of like wait like 100 pages until I find out if this is the right book for me. So they like read 5 or 6 blinks and then say, okay, this is the book I read in full. Or like another use case is that people read the full book and then use Blinkist as a refresher afterwards. So like a big problem is that you read a lot of books and then you forget everything you've read. So they use Blinkist as a recap. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that what we do is not only like condense, but I would say as well like we add some kind of like new quality layer to it because we curate the key messages, and the way we do it often is like there's like the format behind Blinkist is really scientific. So we try to condense the information and present them in a way that they kind of like more sticky than if you would read like a 200 pages book. The third one is like, and that's done more like from the publishing perspective. I know a lot of authors who wanted to write 60 pages instead of 200 pages, but the economics of book publishing require you to write 200 pages because otherwise the publisher can't sell it as like a $15 book. So that's not the case for all books. Like we talked about Sapiens before, and I think this is a book that has like exactly the right amount of pages. It's really dense, but it's like an amazing book. But there are a lot of books where you say, well, that was interesting, but it could be less pages than 200.
So how many people are you in Blinkist, and how are you organized? Like, what's the number of people working on product, on content creation, on growth or operations? That kind of count.
We are, maybe I'm lying or I'm exaggerating, but I think we are 50 people now. And I would say they mostly 40% work on product and content. This for us it's the same because we believe in the thesis that content and user experience must go hand in hand rather than just like create a platform then put content on top of it. The other 40% probably work in marketing growth and then 10% in operations, HR, finance, and internal operations.
Hey, so I also really like the app, just to give some feedback. I was wondering, because the marketing is obviously very difficult, and what advice would you give if you try to kind of create a new market and you really have problems just that people find out about you, especially if you might lack some investors?
So I can tell you, but like I don't have a perfect answer to that because like it's very different for every situation. But I can tell you a bit like about our experiences. We tried basically every marketing channel there is kind of like 3 times until it worked. So we tried paid marketing, didn't work. Then we tried content marketing, didn't work. Then we tried partnerships, didn't work. Then we tried paid marketing again, and so on, so on, so on. And what worked for us in the end was really like paid marketing, was like Facebook mobile install ads, because they allow you to reach your potential audience with like a really targeted message. Because as I said, people don't actually actively look for your product, so AdWords and display ads don't really work. But Facebook seems to work for some reason. So Facebook, Instagram is one of our main channels. What I would do different the next time is I would try to reach out to influencers and affiliate marketing partners way earlier, because I believe if you find the right partners that are on the one side kind of like thought leaders, where people say, I really care what this person has to say, and if they promote your product, that can be really, really powerful. And we see this right now, for example, in the case of podcasts, where we do podcast advertisements, and people who are not just like creating content, but have a message and like a voice, and people really care about the person. These podcasts work amazingly well for us. So this is what I would probably give as an advice: go for affiliate marketing partners and influencers early on, and try to create messages with them that they can then share with their audience. And try Facebook.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm also creating a product that supposedly has no market. So one of the biggest challenges that we're encountering right now is to define the size of the market. How did you do in your case? For example, did you go for ebooks and podcasts, content? How did you do it?
This is a good question, because I think we never really had like when we try to probably the way we estimated our market changed basically every week. So we looked at every research report we found, and we never found our market there. So we find like markets that were close, we used them. Ebooks, for example, or audiobooks were like something we tried. But what we tried then in the end is just like going bottom up instead of top down. So we just thought, okay, how many people read books? How many people like are professionals? So we kind of like how many people need to improve their skills? So 600 million. So 600 million potential users. Then we said, okay, how many of them live in Germany, US, and developed markets? There was like 400 million or 300 million. We said, okay, this is our addressable market. And then we just did like this, the easy math. If we just get 1% of this market, then we're fine. But in the end, it's like really hard to like use research reports or market estimations from markets that doesn't really exist. So I think my advice here would be just like give it a try, and just like I think you have to be convinced that there are a lot of people who want to use the product, and obviously some traction helps to prove that. But I wouldn't spend too much time on kind of estimating the market size, because like in the end you want to create your new market, and this market can be small but can be huge as well. So I think this is how I would approach it. Just think like long term what a market will be.
My question is, when did you know you found traction? When was the point when you looked back at the numbers and thought, oh, okay, something changed?
I think there was like when we found out that we can grow that we can grow sustainable and predictable. So when we found out that actually if we do this, we get so many customers. And if we do more of that, we get more customers. So until then, everything felt like random. So we got like a article on TechCrunch, and like suddenly we saw a spike, and some people kind of like stayed around and converted into customers. The next day, the numbers look the same as before. But when we saw like it's growing step by step, but it's not going down again. This is when I think we found like the product market fit. And to be honest, like in every pitch deck, our growth obviously was like a hockey stick. But I think in reality, it's much more linear, like at least in our case. So when we found out that it's kind of growing every month, this is when I think we found traction. And it was like really small numbers in the beginning. So probably like from 500 to 700, from 700 to 1,000, from 1,000 to 1,300 customers. But it grew. And this like was the moment we thought, okay, it's gonna work out.
Thanks.
If you could start over with perfect hindsight, what would you say is the most important thing that you would do differently?
Hiring. I think I have to say this now but I think like one thing I would do differently is that I would hire a recruiter from day one. I would make a recruiter like the first hire to hire more people, because I think this is the most important thing. Like the people you work with is super important. And if you have like an experienced person that can help you to really manage a recruiting process and to really find the best people, this is incredibly valuable. So I think this is one thing I would do differently, and I think it's like obviously a lot of things, but I think that's the most important one.
Okay, last question. I said last question, but just one more. Like, what is the last Blinkist that you read and blew your mind?
Change the culture, change the game.
Okay.
I didn't know about this book, and I read it like 3 months ago. And I refer it to a lot of people within Blinkist because it's just like incredible. It basically says that what we always try to do is we try to change behaviors. We try to change the way you act. And if I tell you do something different, it doesn't work out often. So what the book says is like it's like a pyramid. It's a behavior pyramid. So you start with creating experiences that change the way people think about things. And if they change the way they think about it, then they will change their behavior. So you try to approach it from a different perspective instead of just like I'm just saying, please do it this way. And I found this like incredible.
All right. Well, I will give it a try. Thanks very much. Big round of applause. It was great.
I want to talk about freestyle product management. But before I start, I want to tell you a story. So this one is Andreas on the left side, and on the right side there's Dennis. Both of them met in a hospital in Mainz. And Andreas was homeless, and they, talked about their lives. And afterwards, Dennis decided to create a Jodel and to ask for help. Some days after it, what happened, out of the community, 5,000 euros, over a donation page were raised. Andreas got several offers for work, and it changed his life. And the reason why I tell you this is not that, because, this is of course, it's a heartbreaking story, but, I think the best way to introduce a product is by, telling you why it exists. And for us, Jodel exists to let you instantly engage with the community around, with the people around. And this can be, for helping homeless people, but it could be also, for instantly connecting everyone in the room and get the, your opinion on the product heroes meetup talks, because we have also hashtags, not only Twitter. So after kind of why a product exists, I think it's way easier to explain how it works. So on Jodel you can discover, follow, and participate with people around in the most important conversations. And basically what you see, you have like a feed where what's different on Jodel. We have user-to-user anonymity, and it's based on location, and these are like our two main different things. And you open the app, and you can kind of chat with the people around. So if you download it right now, you can instantly talk with everyone in the room. You know, before I start talking a bit about what Freestyle product management actually means, I want to, you know, tell you a bit about my path, because it's a bit connected to it. So I started, you know, I was studying in RWTH Aachen University, mechanical engineering. And, you know, during this time I had like my first contact in actually trying to do something with products, with a startup. I didn't actually know that I had like an idea or wanted to do something. I just, you know, saw a problem and I thought, okay, it would be cool, because in my university, which was pretty big and pretty anonymous, it was hard to connect with other students if you wanted to talk about something. You know, for example, if you wanted to get lecture notes, and I thought, okay, it would be cool to connect to them. So I started to use Paint and draw first drafts, and I had, like, with some friends, an idea called Skill, which failed. So it was like kind of the first experience. And afterwards, I kind of decided to study abroad in Santa Barbara, and that's where I met randomly when I was, like, you know, at the beach. Suddenly, like a, you know, beach ball hit my head, and I saw Alessio, who was together with 3 other students from my home university, the founders of Tellem, which was the previous product of Jodel, which, you know, didn't gain traction. And yeah, we met each other, and during this time, yeah, we actually really got to know each other. He was like 1 year above me in university, and then, you know, I had like an internship here in Berlin where, you know, Alessio and the former Tellem team decided to move after they got an investment, and you know, I was in deep contact with Alessio and the team, and noticed, okay, the product is changing. Like Tellem, which was, you know, based on friends and not on location. Which was a bit more difficult, because imagine you start, hi Alessio, I'm just, you know, I just started where, you know, you hit me with the beach ball. So, yeah, I kind of experienced, you know, how the former Teller team fall apart. And, you know, I was, you know, talking to Alessio and his ideas about, you know, iterating Tellem to Jodel. And I was a bit, you know, reminded of also my ambitions formerly, and found it interesting. And, you know, during some time then, Alessio asked, okay, do you want to join? And I was like, nearly finished my studies, and I was like, I don't know. I said no in the beginning, but then, you know, I actually thought, fuck it, you know, in my 20s, it's time to go all in, to risk. And yeah, I decided to join Jodel beginning of 2015. And yeah, that's kind of how I came into the company. And I remember actually, you know, when now it's like 2.5 years ago that I'm also doing the product, that actually I wasn't hired for doing the product in the beginning. It was more like, I remember we were like at this place, the cheap Italian that doesn't look like a cheap Italian. That's like how we call it. And then you just, Alessio just said, okay, you're a good observer, Alex, you do the product. And yeah, that's like now, you know, 2.5 years ago. And you know, that's important to know, because when I now start to tell you about, you know, Freestyle product management, it's like Bombfang MC, I think, you know, awesome song, Freestyler. And yeah, I first, you know, I learned a lot. And, you know, I actually did one talk before, and I mentioned, and it was more like a fun way to describe myself, said, you know, I'm a Freestyle product manager. But then I thought, okay, it was kind of sticky. So I thought, you know, I give you a definition, because in the end, what I did mostly over the last 2.5 years is, you know, And that's the definition for me what a Freestyle product manager is. It's like basically someone who is taking existing concepts, out of other industries and departments, and combines them in a unique way, to solve new challenges. Why is this important? This mindset is, I think, really important because, if you work on a real problem, which a lot of people have, and I think, you better want to be at such a place as if you work on a product, there is actually no playbook. And the world is changing so fast. And in my opinion, the only way to face this challenge is to have the mindset of constant experimentation. But that's enough theory. I'm actually, more the practical guy. So I want to give you 2 examples of things I was working on the last weeks, and tell you a bit about how we freestyled. So the first thing is actually, running location-based experiments. What was the challenge for us? So, in a way, how our product works, you have to imagine we have a lot of different communities. You open the feed and you see what people within a radius of 10 kilometers are posting. You have a lot of different communities in different sizes. And we always had kind of, a problem, especially also when it came to analytics. We used all the different tools, tried it out from Mixpanel to Facebook Analytics. And we always, the first challenge was actually, okay, we have problems in tracking the location, which is pretty bad if you're a location-based app. So, this was actually previously done. We had to set up or define our own spaces on a map, So we took basically the world and checked them into geohashes. That's the system. How it's called. And, we defined our different communities hand by hand in the beginning. The other problem is, if you're running experiments, especially if you want to try out features, is that, if you try to A/B test within one community, the product works in a way that people talk about it in the feed. So if you give something, to one part of the user and the other part of the user doesn't have it, then, it could, in our opinion, and we were not quite sure, make the results a bit false. Or, the potential, for example, if we change something with the feed, could be different because only half of the user use it. So, this was a big challenge for us, and we thought, and I took this because we were actually working with a lot of different people from different departments on solving, this problem and coming up with a framework which should help us to run, to make better decisions and faster. So the first thing we actually did, I call it the setting, is, we took all our existing communities and clustered them, because we found out that, based on the activity, how many people there are, how many posts, it makes a difference if we, roll out a feature to an emerging community or to a huge one. So we defined in our setting, which is important, that every experiment we run, has to work in each community as one of the things. The second thing, which was quite challenging for us, is okay, do we do now an A/B test, or what do we do, if the full impact of a feature, for example, if we change the feed, would be falsified. I don't know if that's a word, but yeah, what do we do? So we decided actually, so we prefer always the A/B testing, but if we don't have a way, we actually try to test within the whole community. and compare before and after. So this is like also one part of the setting which is important for us. Next to more general stuff like sample sizes, where we synced a lot of with our new BI team to understand these things. And yeah, so once you have a setting, we thought, okay, it's quite important to know what to look at. So what I brought you here is now, it's just a screenshot bit cut out from our experiment report, and it's about KPIs. What are you looking on if you run experiments? And this is highly depending on where your product is right now. So for us, we were super focused on retention. And we tried always to run experiments in the beginning and see direct impact on retention. This was actually quite difficult in the beginning, because especially if you want to look at long-term retention, immediate effects in short experiments are not super fast in the end. So what we did is basically we took engagement, and we found out, okay, engagement is like a leading indicator for retention. If engagement goes up, then we can also be sure that retention long-term goes up. So what we did, and this was important for us to understand actually how our app is used, is we defined all kind of actions which we have within the app, and we took this experiment report to understand how it works. So if we now set up an experiment, we try to put in all general setting information, which includes, for example, time frames or like sample sizes. But more important is we want to look at one specific success criteria, which we defined the following way. So as I told you, retention was the most important thing for us. So we basically did a correlation analysis to find out, okay, what makes our users stay? And we found out, okay, there are like several actions which are, which when the user is doing them on the first day, she's more likely to stay. So this is a part which helped us a lot with prioritization, and what actually is mostly our success criteria. Nevertheless, it's still important to understand how the user behavior is changing, and we're taking all the rest of the stuff as a loss criteria. So even if our success criteria is positive and we see, okay, we have our expected change, we still look on all the other engagement metrics which are important for us to understand if how we change the behavior actually, and how this in the end will impact retention. So with the settings and the KPI, once you have this clear, we thought, okay, it's time to sync with our BI team and put the tech into it. And what we did, basically, they created a product dashboard / shiny app, which is putting the magic out, as you see. And this was, basically a part for us, really important step to scale our ambitions to run several experiments really quickly. So this is basically, like a boosted version of the experiment report sheet which you saw, where we, basically can upload all simply user IDs of the experiment and the control group of different sample sizes, and then by one click, actually get all the KPIs which are relevant for us. So yeah, the last part, which is important as you grow, is kind of the documentation. So being able to look back and know why you took several decisions is super important, especially if you grow with the company. So what we basically did with the documentation part is we took, it's like the tool called Airtable. It's basically like an Excel sheet on steroids, and we basically document all the different experiments there to see what is currently running, to avoid double assignments, and to be also possible to look back and to know why we took certain decisions. So all together, which we worked, with not only product but BI, tech together, community growth, which was, part of a lot of different departments in our company. We defined this experiment framework, which is helping us to make faster decisions. I think, one of the things which is super underestimated is like speed. So being able to make fast decisions is, in my opinion, like a big criteria, to be a successful company. And, making them fast and being sure that, to understand how it affects the user behavior and the KPIs you want to push was for us super important. So we spent, this was like one part we were working on, last couple of weeks. And where we faced, a new challenge of how do we approach, running these experiments. And where we just combine different skill sets here to solve this problem. I actually brought a second one. This is like super fresh. It's like about defining your product message, especially in terms of making it sticky. So the challenge right now is, what I experience is like the people don't know really how to describe Jodel. So this is super important if 99% of your growth is actually organic, that the people, are able to describe it or to pass it on. So because we found out, okay, it's not so easy for the user, or they simply share screenshots or try to describe it in some weird way. We thought, okay, it's a big challenge for, it's a big issue we want to tackle, because in the end, if you look at on a product adoption curve, the people who are, the early birds should be able to pass it on to the early majority. And this works best, if they have a good communication. So this all doesn't answer the question why there's a picture of the Sesame Street. So this is actually something, I read from a book, and which catched, my eye, because stickiness, I think, most important part, or why I think the product message has to be sticky is because regardless of your criteria or how well you want to describe it, if people cannot remember it, then they cannot pass something on. And I read actually something, about the creators of the Sesame Street, which were working in the 60s, 70s, about, changing education on television. And during this time, actually, people thought, okay, it's quite impossible to, to transfer or to learn something through television. It was considered more or less something really passive, which you just look at, but you cannot really do something. So this team of creators who wanted to change and wanted to make it possible that you learn through television found out the following. If you are able to hold the attention of the people, you are able to, transfer some bits of information, and through this transformation of information, people learn. In other words, they made, TV sticky. And they used actually a special technique, which, was, they hired like a psychologist, I think his name was Ed Palmer, and he had this method called distractor test. So, and this was actually how they tested all of the different episodes. It was working the following way. They, invited, it was basically like an experiment, and they invited like a group of children, and what they did is they put them into a room full of like the newest toys and stuff you can imagine. And, they included some distractions within the episode, and someone was like sitting next to it and then looking at it and, taking notes if the kids were losing their attention. So they did it over the length of a full episode to find out how sticky their episode was, and they always aimed for like a stickiness score of 90%, so that actually the kids were looking 90% of the time on the screen and not like getting confused by the toys here. When I read it, I thought, okay, maybe I can use the concept of freestyle management to create like a freestyle distractor test to being able to test the stickiness of a message. So I basically took the idea of it and was a bit inspired, and this is something I actually tried out today. So it's super fresh out of something that I tried, and it works the following way. So you can do it online or offline, how you want it. If you have a message which you want to check on stickiness, find out the stickiness score of the message, I would do the following. So you have basically a survey based out of 4 questions. The first question is is actually presenting the message, and depending on if it's new, if it's existing users who know your product or people who never heard of it before, you can ask them for their opinion. So maybe if it's like they find that it's like a good description for your product, or if they like it or not. What follows afterwards are like distraction questions. So you ask them something completely different to move their attention to something else. You can do 1 question. I would actually do, to be safe, 2 questions. That's how I did it in our survey. And one thing you have just to make sure, if it's like an online survey, that they cannot click on later back. This is really important. And at the end, you kind of put a question with multiple choice, selecting options from several product messages, where you have a lot of false answers, where you have, of course, like the correct one which you presented in question 1, and also maybe 1, 2 which are similar but not quite the same, to find out what exactly sticks out of it. So usually, the bits of information you can transfer are really limited. Usually it's really 1 bit of information you can transfer with a product message, and you want to find out what this piece of information is really. So if you then look on question 4, depending on how many people based on your sample size pick the right answer, you can get the stickiness score, how I defined it. And I personally aiming right now, what I'm doing for Jodel is like for around 90%. That's what I think is something which make it sticky. So yeah, and I think overall this is like why stickiness? Because even if you didn't take anything out of it, maybe one thing you will remember when you see me like in 1 year or 2 years, you will think, that's the guy who was the freestyler. So yeah, that's basically it. Thank you very much.
So how do you monetize Jodel?
Good question. So currently we don't monetize. That doesn't mean that we don't have monetization plans, because by the end of the day we are a business. But right now what we see is we have still a lot of challenges within the product. So which leaves us with the decision we could make in short term, being able to instantly putting in, for example, ads, local ads, which is something, and be profitable within several weeks, but don't looking after product challenges and difficulties which could cause us in the near futures trouble, where we lose majority of our user base. So we could do this path, or we could try to solve them, and then long term, when we are super sure about, okay, we are going to have this hockey stick growth, the famous one, that we do this first and then monetize. So we had both options. and we went with the second one to focus on some product challenges first, which doesn't mean that we don't want to monetize or don't have plans for it.
Okay, well, thank you very much. A great huge round of applause. It was really cool.
Good life on me.